I'll be talking about racial disparities in child firearm injuries, especially since the start of the pandemic. Since 2020, gun injuries have become the single leading cause of death among children and teens in the US. This is an issue of the New York Times Magazine that was focused on children who died by firearm injury last year. And it highlighted that of children in the US who die by firearm injuries, the majority do not die from school shootings, by suicide, from accidental gun discharges, but from interpersonal violence outside the family and in communities, what we call community violence. And so with colleagues, including Dr. Symes, we looked at patterns in gun injuries since the start of the pandemic. And in 4 major cities, we found that the spike in child gun injuries since the start of the pandemic has been sizable. It has almost doubled, but not among non-Hispanic white children. So with a large increase in gun injuries among children of color, but not among white children, we see that the racial disparities, which were already large, grew to really staggering levels. Black children experience 100 times the rate of fatal and non-fatal shootings in these cities compared to white children. And so from a safety, justice, and health perspective, we need to be asking, where do these disparities come from and how can we address them? And to what extent do those solutions and causes come from policing or policing reforms? To what extent do they come from gun laws, gun policies, housing policies, mass incarceration? But from my standpoint, I think this has really highlighted the fact that we need to be not only working to reduce gun violence, but to target these disparities and inequities in particular, because this is the only way we're going to be able to resolve them. I have funding from NIH focused on racial disparities in youth gun injuries with a focus on physical disinvestment and the built environment as mechanisms and domains through which structural racism influences those disparate gun outcomes. So just to give you a flavor of some of the work that I'm doing with colleagues, I think many of us will be familiar with these redlining maps from the 1930s. This is federal government policy in the wake of the Great Depression, aiming to support mortgage lending, but only in certain neighborhoods. So you could get a federally backed mortgage in a neighborhood that was deemed good. And what that predominantly mapped onto was whether this was a white neighborhood. So neighborhoods were scored according to these 4 levels. And these scores, they both reflect the segregation processes that had occurred before, and they reinforce those processes in ways that will carry forward. So what we're trying to look at is how long-term racialized disinvestment shapes the built environment today. So basically what we did in this project, or what we have been doing, is to try and train algorithms to look at aerial images from today. Like, this is what a location in Philadelphia looks like today, and spot patterns, associations between these redlining scores from the 1930s and how places look today, to try and draw out what are those long-term disinvestment processes that are influencing how the built environment looks now. And what the algorithm has found is that typically a place that was scored an A, the highest, the best, most favorable grade in the 1930s will look like this today. Greener, less built up, more single family houses. And a place that got the most adverse grade in the 1930s looks like this. I don't know how well you all can see, but highly built up, very dense housing, very little green space. And I think just viscerally, we can tell that these are environments that are going to be more conducive to community gun violence than these. And so we're proposing this as a measure of racialized long-term disinvestment The measure displays some of the properties we would expect, correlations with related variables to disinvestment. And importantly, it is a strong predictor of present-day gun violence patterns. So a place that has this predicted score of D, so it looks like it was redlined, our models find that they have 47 times the gun violence incidence today of places that look like they got the most favorable redlining scores. And so of these many areas that we're working in safety, justice, and health, we think disinvestment is a very important one because the built environment is modifiable and these patterns can be reversed through present day investments. Thank you very much.